So let's give that text a try again. God's steadfast love never ceases. God's mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. As I mentioned before, that's an Old Testament, the Lamentations. And the second text we're going to look at today is actually an epistle or a letter that Paul is given credit for writing to the church at Philippi. Now let's talk a little bit about Paul. I've shared this before. I was never really a big Paul fan the whole of my life. Then I turned 50, and I started figuring out that I too can be bitter and old and pretty determined at what it is that I want to do. So I am finding a new kinship with Paul. We have a beer periodically, and I try to figure out why he behaved in the manner he did for so long. But a couple things about Paul. Paul was an apostle, not a disciple. Paul, in fact, has said that Paul persecuted the disciples, and he was an apostle. And what he did was not really get into that inner circle. He was a guy on the outside who helped plant the church. In fact, we are probably where we are today because of the work of Paul. Now, Paul's work to plant the church actually often got him into trouble. In fact, so much trouble that he ended up in prison. Now, this was kind of a big deal because Paul was kind of a big deal. Paul was a Jew, but had Roman citizenship. He was from the tribe of Benjamin, which was a big deal. He was a Pharisee or a lawyer. He really had great intelligence and had great support in the community. That was until, and he was also a tent maker. That's what he did for a living. He was a tent maker. And until he had a born-again experience. In fact, it's Paul who we get this you must be born again kind of idea. You know, he fell down 3 days, came back up, and could do nothing but share the love of Jesus in the world. Could do nothing but share the love of Jesus. Totally and completely transformed him, and as I said before, he's the one who went out to the hinterlands. The disciples said, go ahead, sure. And really, we're probably where we are today because of him. He ended up in prison for this, in a Roman prison. Now, we have some challenges in our prisons today, but the injustice in the Roman prison was really horrible. In fact, you could only live, you could only have food to eat through the grace and mercy of others. Through the grace and mercy of others. They had no feeding program. They had no mandatory go out and walk. They had no cable. They had none of those things. And they had no food. So a prisoner who was awaiting trial was dependent upon the mercy and grace of others. Well, Paul had started all these communities around and about, and after starting those communities around and about, Paul did end up getting cared for by these communities in his imprisonment. Now, this is what amazes me about Paul. This is what Paul writes to the church in Philippi. He's in prison, awaiting trial. They've been feeding him along with others. They've been taking care of him. And this is what he writes back to them. He's in prison. Keep that in mind. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and mind in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or have seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or want. I can do all through him who gives me strength. That's a letter from a guy in prison, totally dependent upon other people. Wow, pretty good lesson for all of us this week. So we're talking about enough. Who determines enough? What determines enough? One of the reasons why I'm talking about this today is your leadership teams, the Garden Lead team, as well as the finance team, have been busy working at a budget for this next year. And the question we are asking ourselves time and time again is, what is enough? What is enough for the year to come? Not only with the gifts we've been able to share in, weekly music, musicians, movie clips, media, but also the new additional expenses, building space, fellowship space, community, office space, office equipment. Not only that, but how will we continue to make a difference in the community through outreach to organizations that are often overlooked, as well as our new church status that requires us to share in some responsibility to the Greater United Methodist Church. Not long ago, you received a letter. If you didn't, I'm sure you're terribly disappointed. I can get you one. But in that letter was a gratitude card. And that card is simply asking you for your support in helping us figure out how we're going to manage in this year to come. I know this is new for the Garden. The Garden has not done a traditional, what they call stewardship campaign. That's not who we have been. Yet, we have to figure out what enough is for the year to come, and some of us are in a position where we can tell what enough will be for the year to come. This year it's a little different for us, because in years past, when the Garden was founded, we had the blessing, and it indeed was a blessing, from St. Luke's United Methodist Church, to be a ministry that started in the power of possibility. What is God calling you guys to do? Get out there and do that. Quite frankly, if I'm going to be honest, we were able to participate in some pretty sexy ministry early on when we didn't have to worry about things like the boiler or who's keeping the lights on or really even the building. It was St. Luke's blessing that allowed us that opportunity to start as a congregation that did not have some of this overhead. And you know what the Garden did? The Garden recognized that blessing and immediately went to work on trying to make a difference in the community. Not every new church start has that opportunity. Most new church pastors have to figure out how to keep the lights on and do all those things, all while trying to make a difference in the world. So this year, I give God thanks. See, last year we stepped out in faith, and then we had a little help from our friends at St. Luke's. This year, we're going to step out in faith, and step out in faith, and step out in faith. And I believe that God has some important work to do at the Garden. I believe that we are here with a divine purpose and meaning. It is not by chance. Particularly after the week we have had, particularly where our culture finds itself right now, this world needs an open, inclusive, Christ-like community where people, no matter what their faith background, no matter where they come from, experience the love of God in and among community. A few years ago, Adam Hamilton wrote a book called Enough. He wrote it at the height of the recession, when churches were not asking people to participate in stewardship campaigns, and he decided to do something different. He decided it was more than ever an important time to be mindful of the role of the church and community, and so he put together this great plan where you can use biblical principles for figuring out how to live your life and live each day to the fullest. And it was a really pretty cool book, and I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to share one chapter of it. The chapter I want to share is a chapter that he entitled, "What Tent Do You Want to Live In?" What tent do you want to live in? His point is you have a choice to live in two different tents. You can either live in the tent of contentment, or you can live in discontentment. It's a choice. We can choose contentment or discontentment. Which tent are you going to live in? Ask yourself that question. There was a study done a number of years ago, this is kind of interesting to me, about researchers asked people, what do you need to live the best life you can? Some, very few, said they needed about 40% more. But the majority of the population said, I need 23 to 27% more which is just right about taxes, isn't it? Wait. I need 23 to 27% more to live a good life. And you know, when you think about it, we have kind of designed our lives like that. I think about subdivisions. You know, there's that subdivision, there's that subdivision, and there's that subdivision. If I'm in this one, I'm looking at this one, am I? And then if I'm in this one, I'm looking at this one. We don't want to move, you know, to a big gold castle in some place. We just want a little more, a little nicer house. For me, it's about cars. My husband got a new car a long time ago. 2 or 3 years ago. And that car, like, did everything from pat you on the back when you did a good job to, you know, you just say, call so-and-so, and, you know, and then I was like, well, wait a minute, you get a new car, I'm going to get a new car. So now we have these obnoxious cars with all of these different things on it that we had to have that I still have no idea how to use. We're like that. We like what we have, but we just want a little bit more. Consider the time it takes thinking, if only I had a little bit more. Oh, if only we had a little bit more and I got to run to the store. Oh, if I only had a little outfit for tonight. Run for the store. I never say that, but you run to the store and get what you need. You know, what if we had all that time back? What if we had all that time back and we found a way just simply to be content with what we have right now? William Randolph Hearst, you know, the big newspaper tycoon, had a love for art. He had an absolute love for art. And all the art that he had was so much that he didn't have enough room in all of his houses for this art. He had to create a storage bin for the art that he could not display all the time because he didn't have enough room. So part of his hobby was looking for new art, and he found this particular painting, beautiful painting, and he said, I got to have that painting. So he called his agent, and his agent went to work trying to find this painting for Hearst. He searched all over, high and low, to find the painting for Hearst, and he finally found it. Where? In his storage shed. Hearst already owned the painting that he wanted. It was already in his possession. He had what he wanted. Benjamin Franklin once said, contentment makes a poor man rich, and discontentment makes a rich man poor. Friends, I think in some ways we're no different than Hearst. All the precious things we need for life are in storage somewhere. We just got to find a way to pull them out and be content and joy-filled with what's around us. This past week has been the Spirit in Place, the IUPUI Faith Community's Spirit in Place event, and the theme this year is home. We've shared on a number of occasions. My husband's the pastor at Roberts Park United Methodist Church, and this year they've had an amazing exhibit around this home event, and I want to encourage you this afternoon, before you leave here, head to Roberts Park. They have 6 statues of Matthew 25, when I was hungry, when I was in prison, and they're life-size statues that kind of share the story of Matthew 25. They're by a Canadian sculptor called Timothy Schmaltz, and he is actually here right now and giving tours. We went on a tour this weekend. It was fabulous, just fabulous, but it's only here through this afternoon. Part of that project, Home, Roberts Park was naturally involved because they have a feeding program called Soups On. They serve the only hot meal in Indianapolis on Sundays downtown. And so they wanted to be part of it. And so they highlighted Homeless Jesus, which is the statue that's down there. And but they also had this idea, my husband had this idea, of creating a homeless choir called Matthew's Voices. He enrolled the music director into Matthew's Voices, a homeless choir. And I have to tell you, his wife was like, oh, this feels way weird, honey. I mean, come on. We know we can't help you find a place to live, but come on and sing a few songs this afternoon. I just felt so funny about it until I went to their premiere concert on Friday night, where a lot of them have no sense of pitch. A lot of them are tone deaf. A lot of them have scratchy voices from living outside. But 12 people stood and sang music like Tomorrow and Ain't No Mountain High Enough. I have to tell you, friends, I was so spiritually moved by that experience. I can't remember the last time I was that moved. Here are 12 people who found enough in a weekly rehearsal, in a choir, in a community of fellow people that simply just want to share a little bit of a song. They found something special. They found a director who believed in them, and they made a difference in this world. So interesting. Not only did they make a difference in this world, but this was going to be a one-time event. No, they've got gigs for Christmas. I'm trying to get on their list. I don't know how we can get them here, but see, that's how God works. For these people who don't have a place to live, don't know what's happening next, community and song was enough. What a lesson for me. What is enough? How many of us are looking for something precious in our lives? How many of us behave like Hurst? How many of us have a song in our heart, but we just don't think it's a good idea? How many of us have enough? Something tells me each and every one of us in this room. There's a story of a father and a daughter. Their daughter's getting ready to get on a train, and they're embraced and very, very emotional, the two of them. Very, very emotional. And the father is so distraught after the daughter leaves that a woman comes over and takes him and moves him to a bench where she comforts him in his time of need. He goes on to explain that the reason he is so emotional is he has a terminal illness, and it has been determined, because his daughter had to go back to work and whatnot, that she will not return until his funeral. And it was the last time he would have an opportunity to be with his daughter. The woman said, "I noticed you said something to her. What did you say to her?" He said, I wish you enough. I wish you enough sun to keep your attitude bright no matter how gray the day may appear. I wish you enough rain to appreciate the sun even more. I wish you enough happiness to keep your spirit alive and everlasting. I wish you enough pain so that even in the smallest of joys in life may appear bigger. I wish you enough gain to satisfy your wanting. I wish you enough loss to appreciate that which you possess. I wish you enough hellos to get you through final goodbyes. I wish you enough. I wish for you enough of God's steadfast love. I wish for you grace, peace, goodness, because that's what you need. God's love is enough. God's grace is enough. God gives us more than enough.